2 years, 2 months, 2 weeks. It's an improvement, right?
It's been a long time. Questions have built up, mostly where did he go, but also plenty that I've really wanted to have the time and space to answer comprehensively. There's some of that now. Early on, a number of folks asked me whether I might record a Let's Play of an RPG session so that they could get a clearer picture of what one was like. Now, the scene for this sort of content has really blown up over the past few years, and there are plenty of sources for recorded sessions. If there's a game you want to see in action, you can probably find at least someone's interpretation of the thing. Quality varies, both in terms of the participants and the production values, but there are hundreds of hours of options. Now, am I likely to record the sessions I run? Maybe at some point. Generally speaking, though, I think it can be challenging to find players that are willing to have their relaxation time, the place where they can let loose and improvise, put in front of an audience. The most likely option is to find someone who already broadcasts some of their leisure time. YouTube isn't a bad place to find them. Well, I haven't run a game for any YouTubers, I've played in them. Samwise7RPG, a man they call Tim, invited me in at the tail end of his Pembrokeshire game, running Lamentations of the Flame Princess, and then had me at the outset of his sci-fi game set in the universe of Decipher's Wars CCG, using a heavily expanded World of Darkness, now known as Chronicles of Darkness, rule set. That game experimented with handing narrative control to the players frequently, and resulted in some of the most memorable sessions I've ever been a part of. All the games Tim ran that I was in were theater of the mind, so minimal visual aids, no miniatures or grids to track the space between them, or anything of that sort. For that matter, they were essentially just recorded Skype calls. All the technical issues that can cause are evident in them. And they are all uncut, unedited. But if you want to listen to a long campaign with a very skilled game master and invested players, there are literally days of audio recorded for the Wars game alone. As a quick warning though, the games do contain strong language and dark themes, each of them straying into body horror territory on more than one occasion. They're not suitable for children. But yeah, in terms of whether I'll record my own games, yet to be seen. Maybe someday, and maybe I will even post them. You know, even if you don't post recordings of your games, it's really nice to be able to review them before the next session, you know, the previous session before the next one, because then you can catch all the things that you missed and jot a few quick notes about what you need to touch on for the next one, to keep balls rolling. If you have really active players, then a lot of the times, you know, they'll be trying to push their own little angles on things.
And it can be difficult to observe in the moment. And so it gets difficult to sort of reciprocate sometimes and encourage and sort of nourish what they're doing. But if you have that recorded, then, it gives you that extra chance to catch, oh, that's what they're doing. Sort of understand what they're getting at.
I received what has to be one of my favorite comments last year. First off, any comparison to the work of someone like Wong Kar-wai is extremely flattering, and probably more than a little hyperbolic. I wasn't familiar with his work at the time of the comment, but saw Fallen Angels as soon as I could manage. He does lavish attention on the little things, and I can appreciate that. In terms of cinema that I find inspiring, the first creator that came to mind was Andrei Tarkovsky. He trusts in silence, and is also willing to elevate small things to positions of importance. As for what I do, my preference is to focus on things I like to do on this channel, so I'll just list a few of those off the top of my head. A while back, I decided to give printmaking a shot. My fiancé is a wonderfully skilled printmaker who I probably should have asked for guidance to begin with, but I wanted to give it a try on my own. This is footage of my first, somewhat clumsy attempt. I discovered that my initial attempts at registration were less than sufficient for a 3-color reduction print. Also, that water-based inks dry a bit faster than I like when printing with Line Cut, and that copier paper, well, fine enough to hold detail, isn't the most robust stock otherwise. I also found that I enjoyed the carving process. I've had fun with pumpkins in the past, but hadn't really had a go at anything that wasn't round and a little translucent. Since the first print, my fiancé and I have been able to collaborate together, and given her involvement and guidance, results have been stronger since. I still kind of like this one, though. I also find writing very satisfying. My handwriting speed is pathetic relative to typing, so I like to have a keyboard available one way or another. I've had this thing since I was a kid. The action on it kind of sucks, but it's a very rugged device, and the battery life is good enough that they'll typically corrode before they run dry. When I need more screen real estate than 4 lines for composition reasons, or when a backlight is an asset, this K480 is a handy thing. It's also pretty obvious that I have a thing for photography. I started out shooting black and white film on a Pentax SLR, but eventually went digital, using old glass when I could. Right now, I'm using a Sony a6000. It's mirrorless, which still feels a little strange, but I'm getting used to it. As for things that you could say I study, the list is eclectic and unfocused. I wouldn't consider my interests in anything academic per se, but I like to learn.
A number of people have wondered about my upper lip and, what happened to it or why it is the way it is. And some of you have correctly assessed that I was born with bilateral cleft lip and palate. What that means is that, at least, with regards to my lip, what that means is that when I was born, it was essentially in 3 segments, and they were stitched together afterwards. And that's meant a lot of different things for me medically. And I might get into that all in a separate video. In fact, I'd like to do a video about the condition because I think it's worth talking about. Very few people are, particularly public about, what they call these days craniofacial differences. And I think there are some insights that are worth sharing there. But strangely enough, this sort of leads into another comment that I've been meaning to respond to. I've had a number of people point out a similarity between the way I speak and a character from Napoleon Dynamite. The title character's brother, Kip. Initially, the gut reaction is this is not a very flattering comparison. But, when I look at it, the defining characteristic of the actor's performance of Kip is that he keeps his upper lip still the entire time. And my upper lip has always had reduced mobility because of the birth defect. I speak differently because I'm structured differently. Now, if the comparisons mean to draw from some other similarity, I can't say for certain what it is. If I remember the plot correctly, he leads an improbably happy life, though. So I'll choose to hope that any remaining similarity lies there. I had never heard of ASMR or the autonomous sensory meridian response until after posting my video regarding drive-thru RPGs, print-on-demand services, on the RPG section of Reddit. One of the users who saw it cross-posted it to the ASMR subreddit and commented telling me I had one of those voices. For those as confused as I was about what ASMR is, here are the basics from what I understand. The autonomous sensory meridian response is a sensation that's triggered different ways in different people. It's difficult to pin down for that reason. When one of those triggers is experienced by someone susceptible to it, it manifests as a pleasurable tingle, perhaps around the crown or base of the skull, down the spine, or potentially even extremities. One of the tricky elements of the whole thing is that sometimes what serves as an ASMR trigger in one person might trigger misophonia in someone else. Quite the opposite reaction in terms of the nature of the sensation, though potentially affecting similar areas. I'd
like to take this time to apologize to anyone I've affected that way. I've experienced misophonia, and it's not a good time. In any case, some commonly cited triggers for ASMR include audible handling of objects, tapping a cover or turning a page, for instance, soft voices, or whispering, and, in some, even the sound of someone eating. ASMR can also be triggered by, or enhanced by, a perception of intimacy in some cases. Given that very few conversations happen below a certain volume in our modern day-to-day, speaking quietly may feed into this aspect too. There's also the potential for directed attention to play a role. I suspect that's part of the reason that many people seeking to deliberately trigger the effect find it effective to, for instance, make believe that they're a hairdresser, or a massage therapist, or a makeup artist, and then talk through their process, making their audience more cognizant of regions of their bodies. Stimuli may not need to be audio, even. Some people report that witnessing specific ways of moving in space can elicit or contribute to the response. I think the whole phenomenon is very closely tied to attention. Something triggering whatever sequence we have ingrained in us for when there's something that registers as potentially worth being aware of, keeping track of, but doesn't read immediately as a potential threat. I think it works as a function of a sort of soft anticipation or suspense relating to unknown values. If there were a concrete sense of threat, we'd be pushed into fight or flight. We'd get a shot of adrenaline large enough to kick us into a very different mode. As it is, though, ASMR generally sits below that threshold. The reason I specify unknown values is that I find that none of my videos trigger ASMR in me. I shot and edited them, so I have first-hand knowledge of exactly what went into them, and any anticipation is more remembering than probing and discovering. Given that my videos don't trigger any special reaction in me, apart from occasionally disappointment or frustration, it still kind of flabbergasts me that they'd do something unusual for anyone else. In retrospect, though, I can look at the common triggers and the nature of the phenomena and see where it aligns with the footage I shot, with my close-up shots and focus crawls, keeping my voice low so as to not overwhelm the on-camera mic if I'm recording voiceover as I shoot, my voice a little staggered by the split attention. With my generally soft-spoken nature and the fact that the channel was rooted in my relaxation time, why would I speak loudly if I don't need to get my point across? With the handheld nature of much of the footage leading to the occasional sharp shake, and sometimes the in-camera stabilization getting confused and creating a brisk judder itself. Even with the strange rhythmic noise that haunted my Pentax while shooting video. Some of these factors are simply part of my shooting style, and some of them had more to do with the circumstances and constraints I've created under. As such, naturally some will be more likely to arise again in the future than others. I have stated several times, in several places, that I don't intend to deliberately limit and tailor my content in order to produce ASMR. These videos are going to reflect my interests, whether quiet or loud. Any side effects are incidental. Given that I don't experience the effect in my own content, and the fact that it's not deliberately produced, I'm only going to tag videos about the phenomena with ASMR. So, here we are again. With any luck, more than just a silly QA video this year. I've had some partially complete projects on the back burner for quite some time. As such, you'll see a mix of footage from both the Pentax K30 I had been shooting with and the Sony a6000 I shoot with now. A little inconsistency, but maybe that keeps it interesting. Hopefully from here on out this can happen more than once in a blue moon.